Talk about all of this even further with our friend there at Mountain States Legal Foundation, William Trackman. He joins me. William, good to see you here. You know, I could not wait for this conversation because I have so many questions for you about this and why one branch of government seems to really be going after another branch of government here. And William, I guess my first question to you is this. The first kind of plank and tenet from the White House in one of these reforms is this: no immunity for crimes a former president committed in office. They say no one is above the law. They're calling for a constitutional amendment in the wake of the presidential immunity ruling from the Supreme Court that kind of split the baby on that question. And you and I had talked about that question so often about official acts versus private acts, and the Supreme Court made that distinction there, but they stopped there. Have you ever, in recent memory, or does history suggest that one specific ruling by the Supreme Court could create the president, the sitting president, to issue a bevy of reforms in the wake of just one ruling? I mean, this was number one in the bullet points the White House put out about what they want to see reformed. And you can make the through line that from that ruling to this announcement today, that is the reaction here. Have we ever seen that? Have we ever seen a White House respond in this way to one specific Supreme Court ruling?
Well, this would certainly take a constitutional amendment because the Supreme Court just decided on July 1st, earlier this month, that President Trump does have immunity for some portion of acts. That is, a portion of his official acts are immune. We have seen calls to pack the court over the Dobbs decision, which reversed 50 years of Roe v. Wade. And we have seen calls to expand the court for other reasons. And certainly we've seen plenty of criticism of the court, which is all well and good. You know, Americans have a right to criticize our institutions. It's been a long time since I've seen anything saying we need a constitutional amendment directly. Of course, you know, there was some call for a constitutional amendment in response to the decision allowing flag burning. But it doesn't happen very often that one decision in particular is called out for a constitutional amendment. Of course, it's not never, but it is rare.
But William, is it also rare that we're seeing the executive branch, you know, Republican or Democratic administration alike, go this hard against the court? It's not just about this one ruling. It's about some of these ethical complaints and violations we've seen. It's also regarding term limits for justices as well. And we know early on in the Biden administration, I believe in 2021, Biden appointed a commission to study some of these ideas. And they released quite a lengthy study. One of those key tenets at that time was, quote unquote, packing the court, adding more justices to the court. That seemed to have died on the vine until today, when a lot of these reforms have been put out there by Biden. I was struck by the fact that it didn't seem like that was one of them, packing the court with more justices. But have we seen in recent memory as well a presidential administration attack the court like we're seeing Biden do today?
Well, we haven't seen a multi-pronged plan like this for a number of years. Yes, we've had Democratic senators say it's time to expand the court, that is, add 4 justices to countermand the Republican-appointed majority on the court. And I've certainly seen lame duck proposals before, but this has to be the lamest. The idea is that you would create term limits of 18 years for justices. One justice would then be appointed, or I suppose replaced, every 2 years. So you'd have 9 justices, each going up every 2 years for a total of 18 years. Of course, that doesn't account for the fact that there are already 9 justices on the court who have lifetime tenure. So they have to do something about that. And what they've done is they have said, well, those people are now still Supreme Court justices. They still have an office, but they're technically senior status justices. So they don't have a docket of cases necessarily. They don't decide decisions. And so we'll appoint new justices. Of course, if this really went into effect and President Trump won the November election, he would then be able to appoint 8 of the 9 justices over the course of a 4-year term, because Sotomayor was confirmed in 2009. And Kagan was confirmed in 2010. So I seriously doubt this is an actual proposal to give President Trump that kind of power and leverage. But what we've seen is this is a desperation move. They've got an election in a few years, and they want to do something to strike back at the Supreme Court.
So, Willie, what you're saying is there's kind of this element of, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. And you can make the argument that depending on who's in power, the parties will use whatever is available to them and there at the Supreme Court with these reforms if they were adopted. Is that what you're getting at?
Absolutely. So we saw in 2013 when Majority Leader Harry Reid said, we're no longer going to have the filibuster for lower court appointments, that immediately became something that President Trump was able to use when he took office. And in fact, it wasn't a very stable compromise to say it would only apply to the lower court. So once Justice Neil Gorsuch was nominated, Mitch McConnell had no trouble saying, look, Harry Reid lit the spark. From now on, we're going to have no filibusters for any judges or justices. And so President Trump was able to appoint Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett without the need to surpass the filibuster. So, yes, the worm will always turn, folks. There's never any sort of thing that actually creates an impenetrable norm or new norm that prevents the other side from doing the same thing. The same thing is true for court packing, by the way. If the Democrats appointed 4 new justices, the next Republican administration could appoint 30. And then you could have just an escalating series of back and forth until the Supreme Court sets another Senate or House of Representatives. These are extinction level events for the rule of law because they eliminate the checks and balances that we all learned about in high school.
So, William, you mentioned the fact that this is coming from Biden in his lame duck period. The White House last week, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre went out of her way to say that they're not operating under kind of lame duck status. But because he has bowed out of the race, he's not seeking re-election. He is essentially a lame duck president now. Is that why this is coming now? Because there's, I don't know, an implicit acknowledgement on Biden's part that this is a pipe dream. Is it a pipe dream?
Well, it's certainly a pipe dream right now because the Republicans control the House of Representatives. Okay. And if they control either body of Congress next year, it certainly wouldn't pass. And of course, there is still technically a Senate filibuster, although if the Democrats were willing to eliminate the filibuster, they might be able to do that if they had complete control of government in January. But it really is, as I said, an extinction level event to change the makeup of the Supreme Court. We have 3 branches. 2 of them are political. One's not supposed to be. And if you start tinkering with the apolitical branch in order to achieve political outcomes, you end up upsetting established norms, established expectations, and then creating just another political body that's there for the taking. And as I said before, these are the sorts of things that destroy the rule of law because the other side knows that they need power, that they need to countermand what you've done already. So there really are quite a bit of dangers to what we're talking about today. Now, the constitutional amendment, that's certainly out of the question. I seriously doubt there will ever be enough support for a constitutional amendment of this nature. But supposedly, the Democrats think that they can enact the term limit with just a statute and no constitutional amendment. And that would be quite a big deal if they tried to do that.
William, are there any favors, though, for the age limits and the term limits on justices? I mean, this is a lifetime appointment right now. And we've seen some, previous justices really be criticized for not leaving when they should have left. That's not my assessment. That's some of their critics. I'm talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Anthony Kennedy and others here who might have stayed at the party too long. But it's a lifetime appointment. Are there any favors, pros to issuing term limits? Because these justices, some of them in their late 80s, maybe 90s. Yeah. I think Justice Thomas is the oldest on the bench right now. He's almost 80. But do you see any pros in that argument, in that direction?
Well, the Biden administration is quick to point out that the United States is one of the few, if not only, country that doesn't have some age maximum or some term limit. Most countries do have that. On the other hand, we're the American experiment, and we've done things differently and had success for 225 years because of those experiments, and we've achieved them. Yes, there are always going to be arguments. Some justices have gone on too long, and some justices didn't give the next generation a turn and maybe didn't actually have the rule of law at heart because they were so happy with the power they had. But in the main, I'm completely content with the system we have now. We have justices who serve and they generally know when they're not up to par anymore. Even Justice Ginsburg was making decisions a few weeks before her passing, so she felt like she was up to it. So I really do think our current system is, the best of a situation where everything has few downsides.
Yeah. William, we've kind of buried the lead here because in the last few months, the ethical violations and complaints have really dogged the Supreme Court. These stories about Justice Thomas and Justice Alito in the mainstream press here have really cast a black shadow on the court, depending on what political stripe you are. And there's been this huge push, especially amongst Senate Democrats, for the Supreme Court to adopt some type of ethical code of conduct. We did hear from Chief Justice Roberts a couple of months ago. They put out their own, but there was still a lot of criticism that it wasn't essentially very binding or very accountable here. What more do they need to do? I mean, does it give you pause, the stories that have come out of, Alito and Thomas and others? Ethically speaking, do you bristle at some of the stories? Do you wish they would lock it down a little more there at the court?
Well, I did definitely, one recent example is Justice Sotomayor twisting the arms of law schools around the country to buy more and more copies of her book in order that she might visit those law schools and give talks and sign autographs. So there's definitely quite a few instances where people have said this is an ethical problem to use your position and your power in order to achieve self-dealing and self-gain. But look, the Supreme Court does have an ethical code of conduct now. They have been somewhat chastened. They got the message from the public and from the elected branches that this was something they had to do. Yes, it is self-enforced, so I understand why people might think, well, it's not satisfactory just to say you have an ethical code. You actually have to live it. But they haven't really had it for that long, so I don't see any reason to doubt that they will live it. Certainly the public is watching right now to make sure that they are. Yes, maybe we buried the lead by not talking about this sooner, but the reality is that none of these things actually created a true ethical conflict. None of the decisions that the justices handed down were affected by the gifts that we're talking about, either the Justice Thomas obtained or the Justice Alito got. I don't think Justice Sotomayor had any, none of this influenced her. These are mostly attacks on the Supreme Court to undermine the legitimacy of the Supreme Court, so that we can have a day like today where President Biden proposes these changes.
Yeah, because in the bullet point here, it's number 3. The key word here, binding code of conduct for the Supreme Court. They go on to say President Biden believes Congress should pass binding, enforceable conduct and ethics rules that require justices to disclose gifts, refrain from public political activity, and recuse themselves from cases in which they or their spouses have financial or other conflicts of interest here. Let's go back to the session that just wrapped up there in Washington, in the court. A lot of people who watch the court so closely, I think, were somewhat struck and characterized some of the rulings as a mixed bag this session, that, on the power of the administrative state, guns, abortion, that the court was pretty even-keeled, even though it is a 6-3 conservative majority court here. Does that undercut a lot of these claims the Biden-Harris administration is making, that having just come off the session with all of these rulings, you want to maybe put the immunity ruling aside, that it was a pretty mild mixed bag of rulings, and you didn't really know where the court was going to go on any one of them?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest gun case of the term, the court in an 8-1 vote upheld the gun restriction at issue. In other cases, the court protected democracy by ordering that federal civil cases out of administrative agencies have juries, and protecting the people who sue government agencies from having the government with a thumb on the scale. So in many of these cases, there really, even if there were a political valence, it wasn't a strong left-right valence like with Dobbs 2 years ago, the abortion case, where there really was a left-right valence. Now, a lot of this is self-fulfilling prophecy because the left has wanted to attack the Supreme Court. And part of this is Crimea River syndrome, where you complain today that the court's legitimacy is undermined and that the public perception of the court has been lessened over the last few months. But that's part of a deliberate campaign to lessen the opinion of people on the Supreme Court. So this is the self-fulfilling prophecy that's been out there. I do think, since most cases don't actually have a left-right valence, they decide 70 to 75 cases a year, only a fraction of those are hot-button political cases. The vast majority of cases are not 6-3 divided on political lines. That's just what the public hears most, and it's what the politicians emphasize most.
All right, William Trackman, we're going to have to leave it at that. Also, what I haven't seen yet, and I'll be looking for it, is any response by the court or the justices or the court's spokespeople about some of these proposed reforms. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on next. William, thanks so much.
Absolutely, anytime.